Fortitude is the one asset you'll never find on the ticker. It is not listed on any exchange. You cannot acquire it on credit, and no amount of academic knowledge can ever serve as its substitute. Every man who has ever attempted to force his will upon the market ultimately learns a single unforgiving truth. The market enriches the man who can wait and bankrupts the man who cannot. I have witnessed it countless times. A man sees a tremor on the tape, feels that familiar quickening of the pulse, and his gut tells him, this is it. But rather than allowing the play to develop fully, he plunges in, consumed by a need for engagement. His capital is ensnared in immature ventures, his judgment twisted by the dance of every tick. And when the true decisive move finally commences, he is already exhausted both in his account and in his spirit. Patience is not the same as idleness. It is the deliberate act of waiting for the singular moment when action is not just possible, but necessary. There were periods when I would remain in my office for hours on end, observing the tape, my pencil unmoved, my mind at peace. The market would buzz with illusory energy. Prices would lurch, retreat, and lurch again. The novice operators would call this opportunity. I knew it for what it was, noise. The real money, the kind that endures, is made in the quiet intervals between the great swings, those periods when on the surface nothing seems to be happening, yet everything beneath is coiling for the next significant thrust. The plain truth is that impatience is a product of uncertainty. The operator who lacks faith in his own diagnosis feels an overwhelming compulsion to act, as if to prove his own insight to himself. But the market has no interest in proofs. It only pays for precision. A patient operator is not a passive one. He is a hunter in the tall grass, motionless, his breathing attuned to the rhythm of his environment, waiting for the conditions to align perfectly before he makes his move. I learned this lesson at great expense. In my early days, my directional sense was often flawless, yet my timing was a catastrophe. I would enter a position far too soon, endure agonizing drawdowns, and allow my nerves to dictate my exits. The anguish of watching a correct thesis lose money is far worse than being outright wrong. It teaches you that being right prematurely is every bit as costly as being mistaken. Patience is the bridge across that gap. It grants time the power to validate your conviction, to let the market reveal its intentions before you reveal yours. Jesse Livermore, or Larry Livingston as he was known in print, consistently stressed that Wall Street extracts a heavy cost of instruction for every lesson learned the hard way. Fortunately, the core principles he developed to survive these expensive market penalties were captured for posterity by Edwin Lefebvre in the 1923 masterpiece, Reminiscences of a Stock Operator. It stands as the finest possible literary training ground, allowing you to absorb decades of painful operational experience without ever having to risk a dollar of your own capital. To ensure this timeless wisdom translates accurately to the modern, computerized arena, we advise seeking out the Max Davidson Annotated edition. Davidson's careful commentary is indispensable for bridging the gap between Livermore's era and ours. A link to this essential edition is provided in the description below. There's an old truth. The tape tells the whole story, but it does not declaim from a stage. It whispers in a quiet room. Only the patient man can discern its message. When I would sit studying the ticker, I was not searching for mere activity. I was listening for its cadence. Every advance, every consolidation, every price point had a certain character, a significance. If you cannot wait long enough to interpret it, you are not operating. You are making a blind wager. And herein lies the great irony. Most men lose money not from a flawed method, but from an absence of stillness. They hunger for activity. They believe they must always have a position in the market. But that is not discipline. It is a craving that wears the mask of ambition. The most profitable trade you ever make is very often the one you abstain from. I have made my fortunes by waiting and lost them by rushing. The market taught me in its own unsentimental fashion that opportunity is the intersection of patience and preparation. I recall a position that tested my resolve to its very core. It was during a prolonged period of consolidation when the public became agitated. The newspapers screamed of impending volatility. The so-called experts offered a dozen conflicting views. The chatter was deafening. But my study of the tape was complete. I knew precisely what I was waiting for. I could perceive the quiet accumulation taking place while the rest of the world was distracted. And so I waited. Days became weeks. I tuned out the noise, kept my eyes on the chart, and when the breakout finally occurred, it was with a force that seemed in hindsight utterly inevitable. Everyone then professed to have seen it coming, but they had not. They were too preoccupied with chasing the phantoms of yesterday's action. Patience has no glamour. It does not provide the thrill of a swift gain. It provides something infinitely more precious: consistency. The patient operator sleeps soundly, for he knows he is not manufacturing trades out of anxiety or restlessness. He is allowing the market to do the strenuous work. He is synchronizing his actions with the fundamental rhythm of price, not with the fleeting impulses of his own emotions. Let me tell you a secret few will confess. The most difficult part of speculation is not bearing a loss. It is doing nothing. When you are out of the market holding only cash, your own mind becomes your adversary. You begin to second-guess your judgment. You see others in motion and feel the sting of being left behind. But you must remember the market is not a benevolent institution. It is shrewd. It tempts the impatient with small fleeting profits, only to reclaim them later with ruinous interest. A patient man does not pursue opportunity. He stands still and allows opportunity to come to him. Fortitude demands faith, not a blind faith in chance or fortune, but a resolute faith in your own established process. Every great operator has a system, whether on paper or in his head, that dictates when to engage and when to stand aside. If your system commands you to wait, then waiting itself is a position. It is a position of strength. Most men cannot endure it. They mistake waiting for weakness. But on Wall Street, waiting is power. When a man loses his patience, he ceases to think and begins to react. And reaction is the mortal enemy of precision. Consider it this way. A marksman does not fire at every shadow. He waits for a clear target at the opportune moment. The pulling of the trigger is but an instant. The waiting is the entire art. Speculation is no different. There were times I would wait for months for a single ideal setup. This was not wasted time. It was the time of preparation. I would be studying the character of various market groups, monitoring the leading stocks, taking note of subtle changes in volume, in sentiment, in the flow of money. The longer I waited, the sharper the picture became. When the time for action arrived, the execution was almost automatic. This is the paradox of patience. It feels like inactivity, but it is in fact the period in which you are honing your greatest advantage. Many operators lack patience because they lack a plan. Without a clear map, waiting feels like aimless wandering. You must have defined conditions for your entry, for your confirmation, and for your final action. This is your compass. Patience without a framework is simply procrastination. Patience guided by a plan is a formidable weapon. When you know what you are waiting for, time is no longer your enemy. It is your greatest ally. And here is the profounder truth. The market does not test your method nearly as much as it tests your character. It will entice you to act before you should. It will batter your confidence when you ought to stand firm. And it will reward your worst impulses just often enough to keep you chained to them. The only way to prevail is with a patience that is anchored to principle. You cannot accelerate mastery. You cannot command the tape to hurry. The markets unfold according to their own internal clock. The only thing you can ever control is your own response. It is here that patience draws the line between the winners and the losers. The impatient man continually feeds his capital into the market. The patient man waits until the market is ready to feed him. I have often said that it was never my thinking that made the big money for me. It was my sitting. That was not a boast. It was a realization. The fortune was not in the forecasting of a price movement, but in the waiting for the moment when the price action itself confirmed what I already suspected. The longer you operate, the more you will come to understand that time, not your analysis, is your most powerful weapon. When you feel that restlessness, that desire to act for the sake of acting, take a step back. Review your last 10 trades. How many of your losses were born of impatience? How many winning positions did you close out too early because you could not bear to wait for the full extent of the move? The answers will be humbling. They will teach you that successful speculation is not about perpetual motion, but about controlled restraint. Remember this: every major market swing is a story. Some of these stories take minutes to tell, others take months to conclude. Your job is not to rush the author. It is to understand your place in the narrative. If the story has not yet confirmed your role, do not step onto the stage. The impatient operator bursts in mid-act and then wonders why the ending is nonsensical. Patience cultivates perspective. It allows you to separate yourself from the herd and see what they cannot because they are too consumed by their own reactions. In the end, this game is not about who can act the quickest. It is about who can wait the longest without abandoning his conviction. So the next time you find yourself staring at the screen itching to make a play, remember that the market is not your adversary. It is your instructor. And its most profound lesson is this: only those who master patience can ever master profit. When your nerves cry out, "Act!" and your reason murmurs, "Wait," you must always heed the murmur, because every impulse you conquer strengthens the very discipline that separates speculation from skill. Patience is not passive. It is the art of controlled timing. The discipline to wait does not make you weak. It makes you dangerous to every other operator who lacks it. The market respects that kind of strength. It may not pay you today or tomorrow, but when it does, it will reward you in a way that makes every moment of stillness worthwhile. That is the secret. Your greatest advantage is not your forecast, but your forbearance. You do not compel the market to move. You position yourself so that when it finally does, you are ready. And when you can wait with a calm certainty, when you no longer chase trades but allow them to come to you, that is when you cease to be a mere trader of prices and become a master of time.